Welcome to Watching the Throne.
A lyrical analysis of Kanye West.
My name is Chris Lambert.
I don't know why I said it like that. My name is Travis Bain, and I know I had a weird start there, but I feel really good, Chris, today. How about you?
I'm excited, man. It's always a good day when we get to do an episode, you know?
But I think especially this song, because I think of all the songs coming into our analysis of the album, Jesus is King. We're talking about Jesus is King, by the way. This is a podcast about Kanye West. This is his latest album. I would say On God is the one that, man, I don't want to say intimidated me the most because I don't think it's like the most complex song to dissect, but it might have been the song I was least confident about talking about, you know?
Yeah, I get what you mean. And I felt that way. I remember listening to the album for the first time and really feeling like I was on board from every hour into Sella, into Follow God, into Closed on Sunday. I was like, all right, we're seeing like conflict and religion and lifestyle. And then we got to On God, and so much of it was positive. Mm-hmm. And then those last lines, I still remember the first time listening, getting to the lines about like the 350s and the IRS and thinking, what?
Kanye's
like,
back.
I felt completely the opposite.
Yeah. Like there's such a noticeable change between this and everything we need. Like, so you think there must be some sort of transition happening. It's really hard to see on the surface.
Yeah, it took me, I think it was my third listen when I was finally like just obsessively thinking about the tax line and being like, why in the world would he put this in there? And then it finally like clicked. Oh. But I was still nervous in some ways because how were we going to, could this song still have the same shape that we saw on Follow God or Closed on Sunday where there really is this journey? I wasn't expecting there to really, it might be harder to find than what it was, but I think we got it.
Yeah. Chris, ever the storyteller, has done a good job here of setting up that taxpayer line. It's at the end of the song. And I would say about an hour and a half from now, we're going to explain the meaning behind it.
So sorry it will take so long to get there, but
it's going to pay off.
Yeah. You're going to feel like you got your return.
Luckily, not too many samples to go through this time. So like, I think we can get to it pretty quick. I think an hour and a half is a good time limit.
Yeah. There's just inline samples or interpolations. The major one, which involves Young Bizzle and Mercy. I still don't know how great we are on that, but yeah, it's going to move faster than some of the others if we ever get to the song, you know?
Yeah, I was, speaking of which, I was going to ask you if you've seen any movies lately.
I'm currently watching, I finished Her. I finally caught up with 2011. And I hated the ending. I loved the movie so much and hated the ending. Mm-hmm. And I watched Crawl. You remember the alligator one that came out?
I really want to see that.
I hated the end. I enjoyed so much of the movie, and then it just fucking ends. They don't...
This is another good setup for this song because you don't hit the end of the song anymore.
That is very true. It's relevant. It's relevant. You're going to be... I think you'd like Crawl, but the character arc goes unfinished. It's like they finish the superficial plot, and they're like, well, that's it.
Well, here's the thing. You're talking about character arcs. There's an alligator that eats people in it, right?
Yes.
That's all I care about.
Yeah, true. True.
All right. Let's get to this song.
Yeah, and just real fast setup of everything. So far, the angle that we've been pitching with the narrative of Jesus is King is that every hour serves as an introduction to the album and the journey that Kanye is going to go on. He needs to add his voice to the rest as those praising God, because it's when that happens that the power of God will come down onto the world, that power is manifested through people and their actions and work. And we see on Sella that there's some conflict in how he's interacting with the world. Same thing with Follow God, making it way more specific that while he is religious and acting according to his faith and beliefs, there's still parts of him that aren't necessarily Christ-like. And he talks about arguing with his father, like his legitimate father, but then also wrestling with God. So there's a nice marriage between those two concepts there. And then Closed on Sunday again gets into some of the tension between Kanye feeling isolated, maybe in some ways, against the influences of society, especially the idea of the simulation, as opposed to his religious views at this point and just what's best for him and his family. So there's still a bit of a sense of conflict leading up to On God.
Yeah, and that's such an interesting lead into the song, because one thing I've really been thinking about as we keep doing these song analyses and as I keep reading through the Bible, we keep noting these specific moments in the songs. I mean, obviously the overall arc of Jesus is King is Kanye, the first half, if we're looking at the album as a chiasm, and a chiasm has a sort of mirrored structure. In the beginning, Kanye is very ramped up. He's angry a lot of times. He's very aggressive, antagonistic, combative. And then the second half of the album, he's a lot more open. He's more contained. He's thinking about the people in his life more and how he can bridge these gaps with people. And then within the songs, we kind of see that same tension where Kanye is specifically referencing parts of the Bible that talk about peace and goodness and loving thy neighbor. And he is giving it this weird combative energy. And I think he's purposely doing that to note the tension of his character and how he's somebody who maybe isn't always thinking in the best frame of mind. Like, he's fighting for good things. He's fighting for his family. He's fighting for religion, for God, but he's doing it in this way that isn't always helpful. And we've noticed that obviously over and over, and that's a typical Kanye thing to do for him in his narratives. But what I've really noticed from the Bible is, like, that's just so true of the Bible. People back then, like, didn't know how to live by God properly. When who was it? When John the Baptist referenced that line from Isaiah, he spoke about vipers in this very negative way. And like, vipers are people you need to avoid. And that's how Kanye talks about vipers in Closed on Sunday, don't let them indoctrinate. But John the Baptist is referencing Isaiah, who talked about vipers in this way of like this beautiful future where all of the animals came together, predators and prey, babies and vipers came together and coexisted. And I think really what Kanye's getting at generally is just how hard it is to be godly, to be Christ-like. It's not easy. You don't ever know the right way or the right answer. All of these positive and negative, beautiful and ugly things just come together, and you're stuck in the middle wondering like what the best way to be is. And I really love that, like everything you just described, especially heading into this song, which we're going to get into, like all of that tension there when you're trying to be good and how hard that is, like it just comes out so much in this song.
Who's the one dude, was it Simon Peter?
I can't keep track of these fuckers anymore.
There's so many people in the Bible, but I believe it was Simon. I hope it was Simon, but he was one of the followers of Jesus who kept struggling with Jesus. They would argue about things, and the fate of a lot of the writers of the Bible, the New Testament specifically, the followers of Jesus that were writing the Bible and really going to bat for him, and those being the initial apostles, really had hard lives and really did themselves question a lot, it seemed, and would have to be reassured by what they saw Jesus doing and Jesus saying. So I do think that tension that you're talking about is there. And you talk about the duality that we see of Kanye referencing something negative or referencing something positive and then maybe twisting it into a negative in his own behavior. Best, or my favorite at least, example of that was in Closed on Sunday, when he talks about a line in the sand, but he says it was written in the sand, which ends up being a biblical reference to when, who was it, the Pharisees or just some random people.
Yeah, they're usually up to
brought
something.
brought a woman that they said was an adulterer before Jesus, and said that Moses said we're supposed to like stone adulterers like this to death. And Jesus just sat there kind of writing in the sand. And he said, okay, fine, but you who are without sin, cast the first stone. And everybody kind of walked away, and Jesus gave his blessing to this woman to go and live her life. And that makes being an adulteress something that's forgivable. But then at the end of Closed on Sunday, you have the reference to no Jezebels in this house, which Jezebel has become kind of this, not mythic figure, but archetypical figure for somebody that woos a married man or that commits adultery or is involved in adultery. Like if she ruined a marriage, she's a Jezebel. So on the one hand, you have Kanye referencing a story that's takes sympathy, but at the end of the song is aggressive towards a similar kind of woman.
That's what, I mean, we can talk about all of that and like all of that tension that exists in the Bible. But what I love here is the way Kanye applies it to himself as someone who is bipolar and so openly acknowledges the ugly and beautiful parts of himself and doesn't shy away from the ugly parts of himself. That's kind of the whole message of Ye is like, I am who I am. And my job isn't to kill off that other part of me, but to accept that it is part of me. Like I'm always going to have these ugly thoughts. My job is to control them and be good to the people in my life. And of course, that is the journey of Ye and Kitsy Ghost, but I kind of think it goes to a whole different level with Jesus is King because, I mean, we're talking about God here. This is God. This is the ultimate figure. This is the way Kanye's trying to live his life. And Kanye's in such a weird moment in his life that it carries so much more weight than it feels like it ever did.
Yeah, we talked about how Ye was more of him reflecting on how his good and bad aspects affect his external relationships, and Kitsy Ghost looks at the internal struggle. You could almost look at Jesus as King then as the fusion into both external, internal, combining into the spiritual. And him taking, kind of working through those individual ideas in order to bring them together for Jesus as King.
Wow, yeah, totally. I mean, shit. I'm trying to wrap my mind around that because you're right. Ye is so, wow. Yeah, because Jesus King becomes then like, it becomes everything. Like, you say spiritual, like, what does that mean? It means like your placement, like your legacy, like what you represent to everyone around you. Yeah. Oh, too heavy for me right now. We got to get into the song first.
Yeah. So we start off with Pierre Bourne, who's back after some of his work on Yikes, just putting his producer tag. Yeah. Go Pierre. Yo Pierre. And then we start with the verse, and it's a rhetorical question. Kanye saying what somebody else said to him, asking how you get so much favor on your side. And, Kanye's life is pretty good, right? Has a wife that he loves, kids, successful, Yeezys, all of it,
Not bad.
Grammys. Not bad. And he says, accept him as your Lord and Savior, I replied. So giving all credit due to the Most High, some would say is the most fly. But yeah, accepting him as your Lord and Savior is the method that Kanye recommends. And he follows that up with, thou shalt love thy neighbor, not divide, which we'll come back to in a little bit. But this is getting much more Christly here, as it talks about accepting God as your Lord and Savior, treating your neighbor well. Like the question was, how do you get so much favor on your side? And Kanye is really not focusing on himself here. It's more about faith and treating others well, which nice. Okay.
Yeah.
We then head into just a conclusion statement. I'm a ride that's on God, which makes it seem like this is what he's going to be doing, right? Like he's just going to be riding on this vibe. Like this is his new default, and he's just going to stay in this lane for as long as possible.
Yeah. And obviously Chris just ran through those 4 lines pretty quick, pretty easily, because they are pretty straightforward. But But this is the beauty of Kanye, is that the context around these 4 lines has been like anything but these 4 lines. Love thy neighbor. Close on Sunday is a song about like going to war. Like he's noting this scene from Moses, who's standing over a war, and he's talking about Jezebel and drawing a line in the sand. Like, and on top of all that, the production of this song right off the bat is so aggressive and synthy, and maybe not aggressive is the right word, but like it's so chaotic that it's such a different sound than the creepy, spacious Closed on Sunday. And it's such a strange vibe coming out of that song, yet the vibe seems to match really the build we've been seeing the first 4 or 5 songs, I guess 4 songs after every hour, of this antagonism we're getting from Kanye, this person who is getting so fed up with everyone around him, this person who is trying to live Christ-like but can't seem to do it because everyone keeps telling him he's doing it wrong. That's coming into On God, where at the very beginning he's like, love thy neighbor. Like, huh? That it seems so strange. But let's note the production, which is crazy synthy production. And it's all a sign really that this energy that he's presenting up top that seems so simple will not be contained.
Yeah, I always feel like the beat is something that I feel like I'm falling into something. It almost is kind of, to me, I get the image of going through kind of like a wormhole, and it's all these colors kind of pinwheeling around you, and you just get to look around. Very psychedelic, I guess.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But it is one of the more synthy tracks on the, I guess it's probably the synthiest. We asked on Twitter just because we're not music folk, you know, about the synths on the album. And this song specifically comes up. And we know from albums like Yeezus and The Life of Pablo that Kanye tends to resort to the synths more so when he's focused on the more ego-driven or aggressive personality. So having these lines up top that are so put together and calm in a song that has this production, it does have a tension to it, especially, as you noted, coming out of the conflict that was so present during Sella, Follow God, and Closed on Sunday.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, just compared to those first 3 tracks outside of Every Hour, I guess including Every Hour too, there's always been something there to break things up, like a choir or some sort of instrumentation, like something, you know, a sample, anything. On God is just the synths. Like it is just, I think it's really beautiful actually that he's able to make such music out of so many intersecting synths. And it, like you're noting, it gives off such a strange energy that you don't know quite what to do with at the beginning.
Right. Like, huh?
Okay.
Where am I? What am I in for?
Am I in a kaleidoscope?
Is this what it's like to be in a kaleidoscope? So we get I'm a Ride, that's on God. And this is the first instance of this construction that we're going to see where he uses that's on God, or as we'll see, Tribe, Keef, a bunch of other appearances come in. But the term on God, it's typically a synonym or an offshoot of the phrase I swear to God. So you just kind of say like, yeah, I'm telling the truth, like on my mom, or I'm telling the truth, like on my reputation, or that's the truth on God. It can be used if you're trying to let somebody know that you're serious, or just in like kind of a flex, like I'm going to be the best there ever was. That's like on God.
Sounds like the Kanye way of doing it.
Yeah. But in this case, like we know that he is accepting God as his Lord and Savior, and that he is giving credit to God. So when he says something like that's on God, it's not just him saying like, I swear this is going to be my vibe, or that's the truth, but it's also saying like, it's because of God. Like it's God's work, it's God's actions that have caused me to be able to ride this way or feel this way.
Right. So if like, say you were addicted to frozen yogurt and your mom like gave you this big lecture and showed you some charts of what's going to happen to your body if you keep eating so much frozen yogurt, and she gets you to stop. That was on mom to get you set straight.
Right. Like, I'm here today in the best shape of my life. That's on mom.
Look at this 8-pack.
Yeah. I'm here today looking like a log. That's on Chipotle.
And scene.
Nice job. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Improv with Travis and Chris.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So Kanye talks about this boon that he's gotten, and when we look at the next line, it's his light shine the brightest in the dark, which very much recalls, per our earlier discussion, Ye and Kids See Ghosts. I mean, the first thing that we hear on Ye is, today I thought about killing you, and gets into the most beautiful thoughts are always beside the darkest. And that album also has the chiastic structure that Travis referenced earlier, where it's a 3-1-3 structure. You have 3 dark songs, 1 pivot point, which is what it leave, into 3 beautiful songs. So in that way, the whole album becomes an expression of beautiful thoughts coming out of the darkness. What he expresses and the ego and escalation that's present in those first 3 songs, the consequence of them is the understanding and appreciation that he gets on the last 3 songs about who he wants to be, how he wants to live his life. And those things would have only come to him out of having had the dark experiences that he had. But just the idea of, darkness is, and what you were getting at earlier about people having like good and bad within them, there's darkness inside all of us. And kind of what Kanye says here is that having God in your life, or letting God in, his light shines brightest in people, I think he's saying, just because people have so much darkness within them.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it.
So inspired by the light of God and the grace of God and the kindness of God, this podcast sponsored by God, I guess. Kanye goes into the line, single mothers know they got my heart. So he's feeling the grace that God has given him, and he's also now feeling grace for others. Kanye was raised by a single mom, the late, great Donda West. So anybody that knows his story knows that he has a soft spot for that.
By the way, read Raising Kanye.
Yeah, Donda's book that actually she wrote in 2006 into 2007, and it came out just a few months before she passed.
Oof, really?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to go read that book again then.
Kind of sad, but really insightful and great book. But he goes from single mothers to then saying, and all my brothers locked up on the yard, you can still be anything you want to be. Just, you don't have to be defined by having gone to jail or what got you to jail. You can still have your aspirations and your goals. And I think that goes for as much as literal prison to what Kanye's talked about in terms of the simulation and culture, and all of us feeling like we're kind of trapped in what society tells us we have to do or need to do, in the walls that society puts up, that it's as much about prison as it is monolithic thought. Yeah.
And something really interesting is happening here. I mean, obviously we can't get into the main thrust of it because we'll reveal more as we go through the song, but it's interesting to hear that Kanye starts off saying, like, I accept God as my Lord and Savior, and then he transitions to I'm a ride. And it feels like this transition because he's saying, he's looking at these dark spots, these people in peril, the single mothers, the brothers locked up. And you can almost feel like, he says, I accept God as my Lord and Savior. But then he says, I'm a ride. I'm going to ride for these people. I'm going to do good in the world, which naturally, inherently, as much good as he's trying to do, carries with it some ego. Like, Kanye can help these people. We're going to get into the lines here pretty soon. He's going to be talking about the 13th Amendment and how he can end it. I just think it's interesting here how, again, these lines seemingly there's so much goodwill here and so much positivity that knowing Kanye, like it's also setting up more tension in the song that's about to come.
Yeah, this is the same guy that made Breathe In, Breathe Out in the middle of College Dropout to show that he didn't want to be like other rappers just making bullshit ice rap. But he made a whole bullshit ice rap song to demonstrate like how lame that is in order to set up the last arc of the College Dropout and how powerful then songs like School Spirit, Two Words, Through the Wire, and Family Business are in comparison.
Yeah.
Like, do you want bullshit ice rap or do you want like what I can give you?
That's probably one of the more interesting notes between like old school Kanye and latter day Kanye is he's taking that entire album arc that he worked on the College Dropout and doing it like in one song. like so much happens in one song.
Yeah, that's a cool thing about like artistic growth too. Like you see artists become more efficient, though you would think after 5 years of us doing this podcast would become more efficient. And that hasn't happened.
No, I do want to talk more about Crawl, but I want to sidestep it for a second.
Maybe we have grown. But yeah, him having this setup here where he's talking very positive, as you said, but there's still this sense of pride and ego that's underlying it. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we're going to see recurring throughout the song is a really fascinating tension.
Yeah, let's get to it.
Okay. So despite me saying the simulation stuff about brothers locked up on the yard, the next lines make it clear, indeed, like he wants to talk about prison. Went from 1 and 4 to 1 and 3. 13th Amendment, gotta end it, that's on me. Just talking about the incarceration rates in America, something that he's been speaking on, God, since All Falls Down. Like, New Slaves talked about it again. And Kanye, we know in the last couple of years, has been a big advocate for prison reform, as has Kim. So I'm talking about that it went from 25% of African-American men are in prison to now 33%. That's a crazy number. So the 13th Amendment, he got some flack for when he talked on it at the end of 2018, because the 13th Amendment is when slavery was abolished. But there's a clause in the one line that says, unless it's somebody in prison, slavery's abolished. So
yeah,
if anybody's in jail, you can make them work slave labor legally, according to the Constitution, without any kind of backlash, which is why the private prison industry has boomed in the way that it has. And there have been more and more stories and pushback from people highlighting how we have a new age slave labor system in place through prisons, and that the incarceration rates are mainly partly due to the prison industrial complex lobbying politicians for harsher sentencing, harsher policing that gives a workforce that's cheaper than anything else.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it's all part of this sort of spiritual warfare. Like to Kanye, he sees it as ungodly, so he fights it. And it relates back close on Sunday and fighting for your family. Like these are all good things that Kanye's doing. And I actually do think this is kind of a beautiful part of Kanye. He really sees his power, his position in the world and society as an opportunity to do good. Like even though sometimes he's not the best communicator, sometimes he doesn't always say the right thing. Like the intention is always so good, and the purpose is to do as much good as he can possibly do with his power. So, and I'm getting all that from this, like looking at the darkness in the world and looking for the light and what he can do to bring out that light. Like it's beautiful.
Right. But at the same time, him feeling like it's his responsibility to end right. or amend the 13th Amendments in a way that does that. That's a sense of, I mean, it recalls New Slaves.
Right.
It recalls that sense of like, I can do anything that Kanye has oscillated back and forth on for so long.
Yeah. Again, that's all part of the tension of Kanye, right? Like he can't abolish the ego, but the ego allows him to do great things or think great things.
And I think that gets back to the cover of Ye, right? Like, I hate being bipolar. It's awesome.
Yeah.
He mentioned on Kimmel that the cover wasn't opposite. It was supposed to be one and the same, that both exist and you can feel both ways. Which I think is what we're getting at with the darkness and the light and all of that. So
Totally.
it's at this point in the song when Kanye starts talking about 1 and 4 to 1 and 3 that we get the first sample, which comes from Young Bizzle's song Lambo, which may be familiar because the opening verse starts with, okay, Lamborghini Mercy, your chick, she's so thirsty. But the next lines are completely disorienting because they go, yeah, my name is James, but with these hoes, I am not worthy.
Yeah. Those first two lines sound so familiar.
Yeah, though he does get into, I'm in that 2-seat Lambo with your girl, she trying to jerk me.
See, I recognize those lines too.
So it's Young Bizzle here who we have to credit for the catchy ass refrain on Mercy, which was the breakout single of Cruel Summer from 2012. So if you want to attribute this as a sample of Young Bizzle's Lambo or Mercy's refrain, which samples Young Bizzle, you can pick either one. But that's a sample that comes up here. Why it comes up?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, we can say that it's highlighting the ego in a song that doesn't think it's about ego. Like, in terms of the narrative of the album, like, this part of Kanye thinks he's doing nothing but good, and that when the world's against him, it's just stopping him from doing all the good he can do. And that represents ego. And obviously, there's a lot of ego in Mercy in the Young Bizzle song. But I don't know. That seems too simplistic right now, and maybe there's something to those songs that I don't know what it is, but I'm not really sure why that's in there, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just like a Pierre Bourne moment where he's just like, yo, this will be awesome, I'm gonna put that in there, and it just sounds good. But I do think maybe the simple answer could be we saw Kanye on Yeezus and The Life of Pablo, really My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Graduation and 808s, resort to more cliche rap topics and the braggadocio rap and that rich rap when wanting to highlight his ego and running away from something. So one of my favorite examples comes from Father Stretch My Hands Part 2, which I guess not everybody loves as much as me, but you have Kanye really talking about serious subject matter, about what disintegrated his parents' relationship and like got his dad in trouble with his mom and losing his mom and feeling like he lost his soul. It's really serious stuff. And you cut from that directly into Panda and Designer just rapping about like cars. And you're like, what?
And pandas.
Like, and pandas. You're just, why is that a thing that's happening? But that's Kanye's retreating from the actual emotion into the luxury and showing that kind of materialism is what we hide behind, which for the third time this episode, All Falls Down. He talked about that in All Falls Down, how you buy these things to cover up what's inside. So
Yeah.
if we're going that route with it and know that Kanye's done those things in the past and even did it on Yikes and All Day, a little bit on Fire, and the Pusha verse on Feel the Love to kind of set the tone at the beginning of Kids See Ghosts, and we talk about how he becomes more efficient as an artist, maybe just having that Mercy, that okay for Mercy and Lambo in the background just shows that undertone of ego and tension that's still underlying everything here.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely like that theory, and as somebody who just reads into everything, that'll make me enjoy it more. But if I'm looking at it objectively, like, I can see, obviously, as you become better at your craft as an artist, like, I think you become a little more subtle. So like All Falls Down, like, he's speaking in all of that at you. You know, he has a 3-verse song. He's looking at a woman. He's looking at himself. Then he looks at society. He's looking at how new slaves are formed. Juxtapose that with here, like this is like so subtle that I don't know if like I could even call that a choice. Like if it is a choice, it's probably like too subtle for it to ever have a true effect. But I like that theory. It's cool.
Yeah, that's a thing that you eventually reach a point where it's like, are you outthinking yourself? Yeah. Like, is that subtlety amazing, or is it too subtle to have the impact that you want it to have?
Or are we outthinking?
Or are we outthinking? Yeah, right. Don't critique Kanye there. Like, look in the mirror first.
Kanye just wanted to have that sweet okay clip playing in the background. He just thought it sounded cool.
Yeah, we asked him about it, and he's just like, I don't know, Pierre put that in. I wasn't paying attention.
I wasn't even there that day.
Yeah, like, oh. We're going to go burn all of her podcast.
I was out herding sheep.
Should have known. Okay, so we go from that's on me to he, the new commander, and the chief.
Ooh. Which...
there's some stuff to unpack there. 2 main readings. One, somebody could view it as Kanye telling people that Trump's the commander and the chief and saying it in a way of just like, hey, accept it if you want to view it that way.
Which, like, I mean, whatever your views about Trump may be, like, that kind of fits with this part and this idea that, you know, Kanye wants to go help these people. And if you want to end the 13th Amendment, like, Trump is the commander in chief. And if you want to fix it, like, you have to work with him. And that's what Kanye did.
Yeah, that's how he got Alice Johnson working with Kanye and Kim, working with Trump, and Jared saving the Middle East Kushner.
Did he change his middle name to that?
I think so. He was just like, you know what? I need to make it official. But yeah, you could view it that way, but you could also view it as in the wake of all of the criticisms Kanye received for supporting Trump, that he's saying he's at a place now where the only commander-in-chief he's recognizing, or the new commander-in-chief that he's recognizing and praising, isn't Trump, but is God.
He with the capital H.
He with the capital H. And we know that Kanye has some ties to Nebuchadnezzar, right, Travis?
He sure does. He talked about it, in fact, in that Zane Lowe interview.
So he talked about it at the Zane Lowe interview. He did the whole fucking play as well at, where was it? The place in LA that everybody loves, the Hollywood Bowl.
Yeah.
That was a retelling of the book of Daniel 1-4. And that's a story about Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar is this like Babylonian king, thinks he's hot shit. I mean, if you're a king, you're probably going to think you're hot shit.
You know, you already found out. He's cold diarrhea.
Oh, you should start a rap career.
I can write something with diarrhea.
Battle rap Travis. Go out into the world, young man. Show him what you got. So Book of Daniel 1 is just Nebuchadnezzar coming to Jerusalem, I think it is, and being like, hey, I'm king now. And
is it that easy?
Yeah, I think so. And you have like a huge ass army.
Oh.
And they're just like, well, okay. And Daniel's like the son of a nobleman or like kind of higher up. And he gets a little bit of special favor and brought into the court. But book 2, Nebuchadnezzar has this dream. And it terrifies him. And he wants people to explain the dream to him, but he won't tell them what the dream was. Which, fucking kings, right?
Yeah, complicates things a little bit.
Yeah, so all of his magicians in his court are like, Neb, come on, you got to work with us. We can tell you what it means if you tell us what the dream is. And he's like, if you were really magicians, you'd know what the dream is. So he's going to start executing people. And Daniel is like, hold on, wait a second. and goes and prays to God. And that night has a dream where God tells him, or has a vision where God tells him what the dream is. So the next day, Daniel shows up and he's like, Sir Nebuchadnezzar.
Probably with his chest out.
Just walking in, big dick energy. Like, I'm about to show you what your dream is. And he explains the dream, and the dream involved a giant statue of a person, and it had a head of gold. The upper chest was silver. The middle of the torso was bronze, and then it became iron, and then at the feet it was clay, which I think there's something like built on clay or feet of clay became an idiom from this, or a phrase from this. And it's just the idea that there's going to be a decrease in quality and that the foundation isn't going to last. So as Daniel interprets it, it's that Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom is gold, and then the next king is going to be silver, and the next bronze, iron, and so forth, until one day all those kings like are destroyed. And he says, God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It'll crush all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. So essentially, like, this is why God ends up being thought of as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, I think, in that way. But he's ultimately going to be the commander and the chief. So.
Yeah. And I love that because it works for both Trump, who is the commander in chief, and Kanye, who's somebody who we can feel his ego starting to build in the song. Like we said, Kanye talked about Nebuchadnezzar in that Zane Lowe interview, and he talked about how Nebuchadnezzar thought he built this kingdom and said, I did this. And God said, oh, for real? You did this, motherfucker? like I did this. Like you worship me. Like I am the reason all of this exists around you. And I think that tension is really interesting here because Kanye, like we've been talking about, can do a lot of good in the world, does have great power, this Nebuchadnezzar-like power to shape the things around him. But there are consequences for the things you do. And there are consequences for letting your ego get the best of you. And that's exactly what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. And we see Kanye connecting with Nebuchadnezzar because, as Kanye notes, I don't know how true this is, but he says Nebuchadnezzar was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And I think Kanye sees that, reads that, and connects with Nebuchadnezzar in that way because Nebuchadnezzar kind of went off the deep end. And God, what's the word? What did God do to him?
He struck him with madness.
There we go. And like for what, he was just like wandering for 10 years or something, like
in the woods among the animals.
Very good. I mean, actually it sounds kind of nice. Got some chipmunks in there and shit. Like that sounds fun. But ultimately, like not a pretty big step down from being Cain and all the good you could have done. And I think that's, and I just can't help but think that's what Kanye's noting is that like Kanye has this great power and he can't, if you go too far off the deep end and too far away from God, you can lose it all. And I just think it's interesting that we're seeing Kanye really starting to ramp up here in this part of the song and channel that Nebuchadnezzar-like energy. And that's kind of the journey of the album. It was him backing off of that and not going down that path and not going into the woods with the chipmunks.
God, you delivered that with such subtlety and just like ultimately a step down.
I mean, just a couple steps down.
Yeah, and when he does become king again, and like it's in Daniel 4 that it comes up, which I have here. Preparation, baby. And it's Nebuchadnezzar talking at the end of the text. And he's made king again, and he says, at the same time that my sanity was restored, my honor and splendor were returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and nobles sought me out, and I was restored to my throne and became even greater than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right and all his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble. Yeah, so Neb went on a journey, but he eventually added his voice to the choir.
Yeah.
So to speak.
All that is really built into this line of like, he the commander-in-chief, like who you recognize as your commander-in-chief. And if you recognize yourself as that kind of figure, like all of that seems to be built into that line.
Yeah, maybe you mentioned it while I was laughing. But Nebuchadnezzar's main struggle was that he believed in his magicians and deities that weren't God. And each time he interacts with Daniel in book 2 and 3, he is at a loss due to his deities and magicians not being able to support him how he wants or what he wants. And it's each time Daniel, through the Christian God, is able to make that thing happen. And so book 2, Nebuchadnezzar ends up thanking the Christian God. In book 3, he ends up respecting the Christian God more and the power of the Christian God. And it's book 4 where God finally speaks to Nebuchadnezzar and is like, "You mad now?" So it's a journey of going from non-believing to believing, much in the way of Saul/Paul.
A lot of parallels.
Yes. We'll get to another one soon, you know?
Well, let's get to it.
Well, we have He the New Commander-in-the-Chief, followed by That's on Keith. That's on God, which I think of all the lines on Jesus is King, That's on Keith might be the one that we will puzzle over the most for the rest of time.
Yeah. And I remember the other day when we were prepping for this song, like, I feel like I went down a strange rabbit hole trying to explain this line. And in my head, like, it makes sense, but I can't explain it. but I do think there's something really beautiful to the line. So, like, he says, that's on Keith, that's on God. So before, Kanye said, that's on me to end the 13th Amendment. And then he says, that's on Keith, that's on God. And it starts to make me think that when you say on God, you know, when you say like, oh, like this great thing happened, like that was on God. Like I got better, that was on God. And I'm not trying to get into a whole debate about whether God is real or isn't. But I mean, ultimately what God represents is, and especially to Kanye in this album, is like the way you are, the way you act, the way you conduct and carry yourself. Like you do that through God. You believe in the teachings of God and you do good in the world because of that. You're trying to embody what God would do on earth. So when you say that's on God, you're kind of saying that's on me. Like God didn't physically do this. He isn't physically in front of me pulling the levers and walking around. Like I'm doing all of this. So I think, and this might be getting into my kind of personal beliefs a little bit because I don't believe in God, but I do believe, I connect with people who are religious because that's what God represents. Like that's what I try to do too. So when he says that's on God, that's on me, that's on Keith, I feel like there's some power to that, saying like, it isn't just on God, like whether there is a God or isn't a God, it's ultimately us in the world doing all of this. So it's on Keith too. It's on me. It's on Tribe, as he says throughout the song. And I kind of think that's what he might be getting at. Obviously, I can't read Kanye's mind, so I don't know. And it's so subtle and vague here. But that's kind of the energy I get from it, especially after him talking about the 13th Amendment and knowing Keith's going in and out of prison, Keith being from Chicago. Like Kanye could have referenced Chance here, but he's referencing Keith because Keith has had a lot more trouble in his life. It just all seems to meld here, and it just makes sense to me that he's saying like, almost like he's saying like it's on Keith to do good, to not be taken in by this system, to not give his life over to crime and whatever, to go out and do good. And that's on Keith, that's on God.
Yes.
Maybe, I don't know.
No, that was well said, and has like a beautiful energy to it. Like the interpretations I had when I first read it were, and you hit the nail on the head when you said that it's vague enough to where it's hard to pinpoint a specific meaning to it. Like I was taking it as, at first, you know, Keith is so representative of an aspect of Chicago that Kanye still finds empowering and thoughtful, like just the streets of Chicago. And so him saying like that's on Keith is almost like saying that's on this energy from Chicago, the mindset of Chicago.
Right.
Like it somehow blesses the statement, and gives it more of that Chicago grit and everything that Keith represents. But you made a good point to me when we were doing the initial episode, and that's that the previous line of "that's on me" uses that verb, like this is my responsibility. So when he says that's on Keith, is it in the sense of swearing by someone, or is it in the sense of designating responsibility to someone? I don't know, but it's interesting both ways and what the interpretations change depending on how you read it.
Yeah, and there always have to be two ways because, as we noted, on God has two meanings. So there's always going to be duality and tension to whoever he's referencing when he says on.
And then, I mean, another dark horse interpretation could just be saying because Keith did have that trouble in his life and has been able to still do and be what he wants to be, like a successful musician, like he's the example of somebody that didn't fall prey to the system in that way. So that's why it's on Keith.
Yeah, I like that.
What's your interpretation, listener? Let us know.
Tweet at us today.
Kanye Podcast. Yeah. It goes from this idea of, I guess, the present tense and everything that's going on in the world to then reflecting on his life. So this is the first main pivot point, I guess, in the lyrics. And he says, before the ranch, I had horses in the garage, which... Such a good line. The ranch referring to him buying all the property in Cody, Wyoming, which is now populated with some animals fitting to a ranch like horses. But having horses in the garage, you know, cars are measured by horsepower. And Ferrari has the horse logo. So cars are often poeticized or romanticized as having affiliation with horses. So Kanye playing on the duality of just having the materialistic version of a horse in his garage, but now actually having the ranch and a horse.
Yeah, and I think mixed in with that reading is also what he might be getting at more metaphorically and philosophically, that before the ranch, like I had these horses that I have now. Like my garage was filled with how I envisioned living my life and the ideas I had for the world. Like there's so much more to this ranch than just like a bunch of land property, a bunch of land that Kanye bought. The land represents so much to him building his own environment and taking something back. And so before he did all of that, like I had the horses in the garage already. Like I knew I was going to do it.
So he goes from that to when the Forbes cover was just a mirage, which again, like Forbes is for business owners and successful artists, but you could put an artist like Drake on the cover of Forbes. I'm sure maybe he's even has been on the cover, but for Kanye to be on the cover because he has a company that's reaching $1 billion or over $1 billion in valuation. So now he's not only a property owner with the ranch, but now he's a business owner on the level where he's getting respect from Forbes. Like that's just a completely different thing than where he is at when he was just a musician, which is where the next line comes from. They had me chasing statues. That's on Pride.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, you know, where have we heard about Pride before?
Chasing statues.
Oh God, I didn't even think about the statue connection to Nebuchadnezzar. Fuck, dude. I mean, so Nebuchadnezzar, you may remember from 5 minutes ago, or was it 15 minutes ago?
That was probably like,
so long.
No, I'd say like 25, 35 minutes ago.
The last line that we hear of Nebuchadnezzar in the entirety of the Bible is, and those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. So Kanye's saying they had me chasing statues. That's on Pride. So he was chasing Grammys. He was just, his highest goal wasn't land, it wasn't business, it was just the Grammys, which is a way I think Kanye would say of keeping the artist distracted from really using all of the power that's available to them, which is cool, but also gets into the idea that he was in a Nebuchadnezzar-ish position of having more pride than anything else. and he needed to probably be humbled by God at some point.
It's a great adjective, Nebuchadnezzar-ish.
I'm full of them.
Also, I want to know, and I was going to put this into the genius annotation, but I'll just say it now, and someone else can go put it in, I guess. But when Kanye references Forbes, I can't help but think that's a subtle nod to us, right?
It has to be.
I mean, I know Zach wrote the article, but I mean, we've dedicated more time to him than anybody.
Kanye had never mentioned Forbes until we started writing for Forbes.
I'm just saying. And
coincidence?
By the way, we've never talked about this, but when Kanye was talking about his Jesus is King movie, he said they're making comparisons to Kubrick. And as far as I know, I'm the only one that ever made a comparison to Kubrick. So I feel like he read it, or at least saw it.
You did write a whole ass Forbes article about Kanye and Kubrick.
I did. How I think it was called Jesus is King is Kanye West 2001 A Space Odyssey. So Kanye, just want to let you know, I know you're listening to the show. I know you're reading our articles, and we're here for it. If you ever want to come on the show, let us know. It'll only take 2, 3, 6 hours of your time.
Kanye, the next article I write, the first letter of every sentence is going to be a secret message just to you.
I'm gonna try that for your next article. I'm gonna read what it is.
It just comes out like, shy guys in the summer wear shirts when they swim. I don't know.
Sounds like a great hook to something.
I was a shy guy and used to wear a shirt in the summer when I swam.
Change it to Chai Guys, and you got yourself a Kanye West hook.
Oh.
Or like a chant song or something. Kanye would probably scoff at that.
That's on Keith. But they had me chasing statues. That's on Pride. You can read that back to Nebuchadnezzar and just the statue with the clay feet, having pride and being humbled. And then we go from that's on Pride to, oh my God, Bus said that's on Tribe. Which that gets to a reference from the song called Oh My God by A Tribe Called Quest, that has what Genius notes and what Travis told me ahead of time is one of the most annoying refrains in any rap song. And it's just Busta going, oh my God, yes, oh my God, over and over and over again.
It's actually pretty funny.
I don't, typically we try to find like a lot of, or we can find, or we force meaning from the samples or interpolations. I find it a little difficult to point to anything specific other than the fact that, just Tip and Fife are just kind of doing like typical egotistical
what
rap.
They do.
Yeah. Not typical in a bad way, but just it's classic hip hop.
Yeah.
You do have something like Drafting of the Poets. I'm the number 7 pick by Q-Tip, and number 7 tends to be associated with the letter G and God, so it's considered a holy number in some spiritualities and faiths. And I'm pretty sure it was saying that Tip is part of the 5%er group, which was a specific faith offshoot that gave a lot of clout to symbols like that. So there's some God references in the song, but I think it might just probably be getting at some of the ego and bringing in some of that braggadocio.
Yeah, I think that is typically the path we take. Like, all right, how can we apply this to that? And we really try to look within like the song's lyrics and apply those lyrics to Kanye's song. I think here, to me, it's different. The power of it is different, and that it's not something that could be explained in that way. And it's just that Kanye says, oh my God, to reference the Tribe song and reference Bust in that song. And he says, Bust said that's on Tribe. And to me, that just, it kind of becomes reflective of timelines in history and the people that have tried to do good in history. And we know Kanye looks up to Tribe Called West.
Just called him a Tribe Called West.
It's very late in the day. I've been telling Chris, I've been waking up at 5 a.m. to work out. I've been really tired lately. So, Yes. I'm just going to say A Tribe Called West. Deal with it. I know I got it wrong. Kanye's on my mind. But we know Kanye looks up to them. And I think that kind of becomes... I think it's kind of poetic and beautiful that throughout the song, Kanye keeps saying like who it's on him, it's on Keith, it's on Tribe. Like there starts to become this connection to where it was on Tribe and Tribe inspired Kanye. So it's on Kanye and Kanye inspired Keith and it's on Keith. And it kind of becomes reflective of like the good you create in the world when you do good. And again, I have no fucking idea if that's what Kanye's doing, but that's the power I draw from the line. So deal with it.
It's a very positive interpretation. I like it. If you want to take a more negative interpretation, it has him saying, they had me chasing statues. That's on Pride. Oh my God, Bust said. That's on Tribe. When I thought the book of Job was a job. The devil had my soul, I can't lie. It starts getting into this period where Kanye was in more of a negative headspace. Mm-hmm. And you can maybe read that line of just Kanye viewing Oh My God as nothing more than a hook from a Tribe Called Quest song at that point in his life.
Right.
That he was kind of lacking the faith that he has now.
Yeah, very true.
But yours is way more uplifting and beautiful.
So depending on however you're feeling today, if you need to find some goodness in the world, go with what I said. If you're feeling cynical, go with Chris.
Hey. C's for cynical.
And T is for, God, what's a nice word with T? Again, I haven't slept in a while.
What is a nice word that begins with a T? Tubular?
Tubular, man.
Tremendous?
No.
Tremendous?
Tubular.
Tuplifting?
No. Tubular, fucker. Or, you know what? Tubular or tapful?
Tapful?
That's a reference to last episode. Chris doesn't remember anything.
No. I forget what we said as soon as we say it. I strike it from my mind like I'm God and my mind's Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, you got a real life memento scenario going on here.
I just bought an ink pen so I can tattoo myself with nice reminders. That's on Tribe. When I thought the book of Job was a job. Job and job is funny just because Job is spelled like job. Ha ha ha. Hey.
Who's Job, though?
Oh, Job. Job was the Nebuchadnezzar of the Old Testament. Job had 42 books where Nebuchadnezzar only had the 4 in Daniel.
Damn.
Like, poor Job went through a lot.
That motherfucker went through hell.
Yeah, like, literally, God made a deal with the devil. Where he's just like, Job will stand by me no matter what. And the devil's like, bet? And God's like, yeah, okay, do what you got to do. I'll show you. So the devil just like fucks up this guy's life for years. Like, what was it? All of Job's like wife died. His children died. He lost his farm, lost everything. He's just like torn down, dragged through the ringer. Not good. And yet the whole time, as he should be losing faith in God, because why would God do this to him? He maintains his faith in God and his belief in God and continues to praise God and know that he'll be brought through this. So a little different than where Nebuchadnezzar was, but similar in that at the end of the ordeal, both are very thankful to God and both enjoy a boon, the same way that Nebuchadnezzar ended up being a better king than ever before and restored to his rightful place. Shall I detail all the things that Job was given?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I love this part.
Okay. So Job, very contrite, first says to God, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is it that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now and I will speak. I will question you and you shall answer me. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. Like the bold words of a very humble man.
People, that's what I love about the Old Testament. People are just so dramatic. It's crazy.
Yeah. I want to go up to somebody, like they hold the door for me going into a restaurant. I'm like, oh my God, I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes.
And then you offer them like a herd of cattle.
Yeah, right. So the first thing in the epilogue is Job has to do, people that weren't true believers have to sacrifice, and Job has to pray for them. And so after Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. All his brothers and sisters and everyone who had known him before came and ate with him in his house. They comforted and consoled him over all the trouble the Lord had brought on him, and each one gave him a piece of silver and a gold ring. The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the former part. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys.
What do you do?
I don't, I'm wondering, he's like, honey, I'll be back in 6 months. I have to walk out and count the sheep.
I got to go feed the camel, so I'll be back in 6 months.
So many camel. I guess he could employ a lot of people. It's so many things. And he also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. The first daughter he named Jemima, the second Keziah, and the third Karen. Maybe I'm
the
saying
fourth
that wrong.
North and the fifth Saint.
Nowhere in all the land were there found women as beautiful as Job's daughters, and their father granted them an inheritance along with their brothers.
A weird part of that.
Right? After this, Job lived 140 years.
Jesus, man.
He saw his children and their children to the 4th generation, and so Job died an old man and full of years.
I know it's ultimately a good thing. It's presented as a good thing to have a big family and lots of animals, but at the same time, don't you think God kind of burdened him a little bit? Job has no time to himself. Those 140 years, all he's doing is managing his herd and caring for kids.
Which I guess, they did have TV.
Yeah.
So maybe that's really the greatest gift is lack of boredom.
You just go out and stare at your sheep for a few hours.
And you're just like, all right, try to name them all.
Or try to count them all. And if you lose count, you just start over, and it's fun.
Then he's like, who's that guy out there? It looks like the king Nebuchadnezzar just roaming around my sheep. Oh, man. So Kanye thought the Book of Job was a job, but the reference to Job here is fitting in that Job was challenged and ultimately benefited. And Kanye has related to Paul, who lived in sin and was redeemed and ultimately became a saint. Nebuchadnezzar, who had a lot, lost it all, and was redeemed. And now talks about Job, who never doubted, but went through hell and came back stronger than ever before. So there seems to be a connection in terms of these stories of people that were down and then bounced back, which, if you know anything about Kanye as a person, he's had a number of situations where he shot himself in the foot and was able to bounce back. 2010, 2009, and then again in 2018, 2016, some ways too. So
It's happened a lot.
Yeah, you can imagine why Job would be on his mind, and the idea of challenge leading to blessing.
Yeah. And I think that's just such a beautiful way of putting it. He viewed the Book of Job as a job and thinking of what Job went through as a job. Because I was looking at my favorite Bible site, Bible Study Tools, and I was reading an evaluation of the Book of Job, and it was basically what drove Job the most crazy wasn't losing all of these people and wasn't the thought of why God would do this to me, but the fact that God wasn't there. That's what drove him the most crazy. He's like, why is all this happening to me, and why isn't God coming forth and telling me why? And again, I think that gets at the idea of God, because God isn't there. He's not going to always come down and tell you what's up. You always are just wondering what God's actions mean and why God would do the things he does, and you're trying to piece all of it together and live in a godly way. I think Kanye's referencing that, like, the pain and turmoil you can go through wondering why God isn't there to explain everything to you can feel like a job, when really believing in God is just a way of life. God isn't going to be there. You just have to trust in him, and you have to live your life as God would. So I think that's really what Kanye's getting at here is, like, I need to not be in that mindset. Like, I just need to always carry myself as God would.
And if you want to go cynical route as well, that he just thought reading the Bible was a job at that point and not something he wanted to do.
The way Kanye did it, it was kind of a job.
Yeah.
All those tabs and marks.
Yeah, right. He's been busy in that thing. So when I thought the book of Job was a job, the devil had my soul, I can't lie. He's talked a lot recently about how he used to work for the devil and now he quit and he's working for God, and how the devil has all the best artists working for him, which is pretty funny. But he just, again, talks about how his soul wasn't in the right place, and he can't lie about that. He has to admit it. Life gonna have some lows and some highs. There's gonna be dark spots and some bright spots. Before the Grammys ever gave a nod, I wore my heart on my sleeve. So chasing statues, that's on Pride, before the Grammys ever gave a nod. So it brings it back to the idea of the Grammys and the success of chasing Grammys. And there's something fitting about that idea, especially when we talked earlier about the simulation of him saying, before he had this attention of being a Grammy Award winning artist, he would wear his heart on his sleeve. And he couldn't hide how he felt about anything. And the implication to me of that line then is that after the Grammys and after he became the superstar, he became more self-conscious of that and began hiding more and more things. And even though he was the guy that wrote Jesus Walks, right? You didn't get another Jesus Walks-like song from Kanye after that, did we?
I would say, yeah, not for a while.
Not for a long time, unless you count the next song, Never Let Me Down. But in terms of like 2005, like Graduation, no. 808s, no. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, no. Yeezus, he called himself a god. You have to go really until The Life of Pablo for him to really start getting back into that degree of godliness. And he talked about, even then, part of coming out of Life of Pablo and his mental breakdown and the bipolar diagnosis was that he started to feel like he couldn't say what he wanted to say. Like he had lost his superhero cape. Mm-hmm. So I do wonder if that's kind of getting at that, just the impact that the attention and industry had on him once he became such a part of it.
Yeah. One interesting thing that, I mean, it's come up naturally because we're talking about the lyrics, but we haven't noted is he's talking in the past tense so much and how he used to be, which is humbling on one way you look at it. Like, oh, I used to be this, blah, blah, blah. But it's also kind of egotistical, right? Because it's like, well, I used to be like that, but like now I know everything. Now I'm all put together. Like I know what I'm doing now. It's kind of a commentary on his current self by always looking in the past and kind of noting the negative things about himself from the past.
Yeah, you would expect from the contrast, because the song starts in the present with him dedicating himself to God and treating his neighbor right. So when we get that first before and get into the past tense, it's a contrast. And now we have the second before that still is getting into the same thing. You think that it sets up him being this far better person that no longer has the devil in his soul, no longer has the same pride. But as we'll see at the end,
Yeah.
I couldn't hide. In 2003, they told me not to drive. That's a reference to... It's not, though, right?
Are you saying that's when his car crash was?
Yeah, was it his car crash in 2002?
I don't know. I just know it's before Through the Wire.
On October 23rd, 2002, this is from a Spin article. Kanye was leaving a Los Angeles recording studio after a late night session when his rented Lexus collided with another car, leaving him hospitalized. According to rap legend, the experience of the accident inspired West to get out from behind the boards and pursue his dream of becoming an artist in his own rights. You can hear how strained he sounds on the recording, and the crash made a big enough impact on him that he rapped about other songs too. I know I got angels watching me from the other side, he said on Never Let Me Down, thanking God that he didn't die in his car that night. I mean, it might be that this is ungrounded, unsubstantiated. The only way that I can make sense of this, at least right now, is that after his accident in October of 2002, in 2003, when he was back in the studio, they were always telling him not to drive.
That seems to make sense to me.
Yeah.
I mean, he could have just said '02 and there'd be no confusion.
Right. But he had to go with '03. '03. I do wonder then, it talks about like, this is going to be a stretch. Talks about like, I wore my heart on my sleeve. I couldn't hide in '03. They told me not to drive. Like people are already starting to like tell him what to do and not to do. Mm-hmm. But that's probably taking it to a place that it doesn't need to go.
Yeah. But for Kanye, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I bleached my hair for every time I could have died. I feel like we should have looked at how many times he bleached his hair in 2019. But it was a number of times, right?
Yeah. And there's something, I mean, you could take that line as is, I guess, but there's something, again, to me, poetic about that. And the idea of, he talks about being awake and being asleep on the album and interviews, and this idea that he was asleep for so long. And I almost just feel like it gets at this idea of like being aware and being rebirthed. Like to him, bleaching his hair isn't just something that looks cool. It's something he does symbolically, a way of like renewing himself.
Yeah, just to feel refreshed. It's almost like a different kind of baptism.
Yeah, totally. On an album that is basically detailing a baptism.
But I know people have like found a lot of meaning in this line because it's giving depth to something people only saw as a superficial decision.
Yeah, I think it gets at the more of the metaphorical idea of death, and and a song where he's talking about Nebuchadnezzar and all these people who went off the deep end. Like to him, I think he views that as dying, and he's overcoming that.
Yeah, not to mention the metaphysical, spiritual moments of death.
Yeah.
But I survived. That's on God. So again, that twist on that's on God. Like this time,
yeah,
it's God's the one that's responsible for it. I've been telling you all since '05, the greatest artist resting or alive. So living or dead. And '05, the only thing we could really think of was there could be a reference to some line on Late Registration, but it was February of 2005 that Kanye accepted his Grammy for Best Rap Album.
Classic.
So, I mean, he doesn't say that he's the greatest resting or alive there, but I feel like that moment was kind of him stepping onto the stage and declaring, kind of drawing a line in the sand, if you will.
Yeah.
And setting it all off in motion.
I mean, it's a song where he's referencing the Grammys twice and chasing statues, and he's talking about his past self. This seems to just be getting at that.
We're in the speech focused on the car accident, and he just referenced the car accident.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so that's why we think it's a Grammy speech. It might be something else if you have an idea at Kanye Podcast, And then he says that's on L.A. Reid, that's on Clive, which that actually comes from L.A. Reid, who was a executive at somewhere.
Yeah, where was that?
Genius, thank you. L.A. Reid is a record executive, publicist, and founder, co-chairman of Hitco Entertainment. He most notably served as former chairman of Epic Records. So he played a significant role in the promotion of Kanye's albums when he first started out as a rapper. And he legitimately, in an interview in 2016, called Kanye the greatest of all time.
There we go.
Yeah. So when he says that's on L.A. Reid, it's more of that, like, L.A. Reid said this. Like, that's on him. He said it.
Speak it into existence.
Yeah. And then he says Clive. Genius refers to Clive Davis. L.A. Reid had succeeded Davis as the president of Artista Records in 2000. But I don't know what relationship Davis and Kanye have. Granted, I didn't do as much looking into it, but I also didn't see much there on the surface.
Well, if we're going with my timeline theory, it just could be that L.A. Reid came into existence because of Clive, and L.A. Reid spoke Kanye's greatness into existence. So it's on Clive.
It's on Clive.
Who knows?
Yeah, that like legacy and connection between them. Somebody on Genius said that it could be Clive Calder, who is the founder of Jive Records, since Kanye says that's no jive right afterwards. But I also couldn't find something there. I tried looking up Clive Davis and Kanye, and all I found was a chief theater critic in the UK who said Kanye West is not Picasso. It's from Leonard Cohen's poetry book.
Oh, I love Leonard Cohen. I liked your theory from the other day when you said that Kanye says that's no jive, so you knew he was talking about Clive Davis and not Clive Calder. Like Kanye felt the need to put it in a line of like, no, not that Clive though.
Right? Like, no jive. No jive here. Do not associate it with Clive Calder. It's Clive Davis.
Just needed another rhyme, and you know what? That's what came out.
Yep. And there's a little bit of wordplay. If he is referring to Jive Records, either because it is Clive Calder or not Clive Calder, Jive talk was a type of slang talk that was big in the, was it 60s and 70s or 70s, 80s?
I don't know.
It ended up getting a kind of it was confusing to a lot of people just because it was so esoteric in terms of what was being referenced. So there's a scene in the movie Airplane that Urban Dictionary references that has a couple people speaking jive, and one of the characters just has no idea what's being said. And there's a woman that translates all of it for the stewardess. So Kanye's just saying that's no jive, as in like, I'm just being very clear and straightforward. There's no confusing lingo here, nothing like that. It's just greatest artist.
I like that theory.
And then, okay, we go off the 350s he supplied.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we're back more to the present. But you do notice a shift, right, already? That Kanye went from talking about, like, chasing statues and pride to now calling himself the greatest artist, resting or alive, and now talking about his 350s and how successful they've been. There's a little bit more ego that's come into the picture at this point.
Just a little bit. Especially because the 350s are supplied by God.
Right. Like, you know, God supplied the 350s. Oh, this is going to be so good. Okay.
But it does get at, like, I know you're going to go into a whole thing, but it does get at this, again, this idea, like, God supplied it. It's on God that these 350s exist. And carrying that energy of, like, if it's on God, then it's for good. And Kanye can do good with his 350s. I feel like ultimately that is generally what Kanye is saying. Like, he sees all the good he can do with all the money he can make from these 350s, all the good he can spread into the world. But with that, when you say those kinds of things, like, again, that's just, it's pure ego. Like, you're only thinking about, like, all the power you have in that situation.
Right. And how your power is mitigated by having to pay taxes.
Yes.
Like, the IRS want they 50 plus our tithe. So it's like the 10% tithe is 10% of your earning given back to the church. So it's like the IRS not only wants the 50% tax, but they want the money that's supposed to go to God as well. And Kanye says, man, that's over half of the pie. I felt dry. That's on God. So this idea of losing out on that much money to the government left him feeling like he didn't have enough.
Yeah.
And that's the honest truth in this situation. That's where on God's coming from here. Getting then into, that's why I charge the prices that I charge, of responding to why everything Yeezy is so expensive, and finishes that up with, I can't be out here dancing with the stars. No, I cannot let my family starve. Because a lot of former stars that are in need of money and to restart their career or get back into the limelight will go on something like Dances with the Stars, just to get the payday and whatever comes after it. And he ends there with, no, I can't let my family starve. I go hard. That's on God. So much to unpack.
Man, if we're going to get into, I bet you never thought you'd hear this. We're going to talk about taxation in the Bible. But there's something, actually, maybe we should talk about taxation first before I get into what I'm about to do.
Ooh, I'm now really curious about what you're going to do. So the scene is in Matthew 22, and Jesus is speaking to Pharisees, I do believe.
Yes.
That's who it is?
They're always up to something.
They're like the Tom to Jesus's Jerry of the Bible.
They're the rival fraternity in Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah, there we go. Well, okay, so Jesus, in Matthew 21, Jesus comes to Jerusalem as king. Ooh. And then he goes to the temple, and he entered the temple courts and drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of money changers and the benches of those selling doves.
Oh, gosh, again,
it is
so
written,
dramatic.
Right? It is written, he said to them, my house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers. Ooh. And then he curses a fig tree. What is it? So he was hungry. Seeing a fig tree by the road, he went up to it, but found nothing on it except leaves. Then he said to it, may you never bear fruit again. Immediately the tree withered.
Jesus.
When the disciples saw this, they were amazed. How did the fig tree wither so quickly, they asked. Jesus replied, truly I tell you, if you have faith and do not doubt, not only can you do what was done to the fig tree, but you can also say to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and it will be done. If you believe, you will receive whatever you ask for in prayer. Okay. So then he enters temple courts and gets a bunch of questions. He gives a parable of 2 sons, a parable of tenants, and then he starts getting into the parable of a wedding banquet, where he talks about the kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son, and essentially everybody who's invited to the wedding ends up taking advantage or doesn't want to go. So God gets mad and kicks them all out and goes and gets his servants to bring other people to the wedding. So just another time where God is portrayed as a king or commander-in-chief, if you will. But coming off of that story, the Pharisees show up. And it says they went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. They sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. Teacher, they said, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are. Sounds like Kanye. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Ooh.
Man, Jesus is in a pickle here.
Yeah, right? Like, does he say God, God, God? Or does he, follow the laws of Caesar? Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, you hypocrites. Why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax. They brought him a denarius, and he asked them, whose image is this, and whose inscription? Caesar's, they replied. Then he said to them, so give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. When they heard this, they were amazed, so they left him and went away.
So, I think this is interesting because, again, kind of like we noted earlier, the tension we keep seeing at the beginning of Jesus is King has always existed in the Bible. And it relates, of all things, to taxes. This idea that, like, it's not godly to make people give the government money, like, right? Like, it's their money. They earned it. But at the same time, it is godly because the money you give goes to help other people and becomes the infrastructure of where you live. And it does good. So I think that same tension is happening here, where Kanye is saying, like, man, like, God supplied the 350s and the IRS is taking all my money, all this money I can go out and do good in the world with. It gets at that natural inherent tension you have, because earlier in the song, Kanye's talking about loving thy neighbor and thinking about the single mothers and his brothers locked up. And this to me seems like, he was so with the people back then and so thinking about them. And in this moment, he's not. He's just thinking about the fact that he's earned his money, and it's not godly. It's not right that the IRS just gets to take half of it. He has good intentions, but he's so clouded by his ego that he doesn't realize the contradiction that's going on.
Yeah, because, all the things that go into helping to support or make life easier in some ways for single mothers, the things that go into supporting prisons and not private prisons, tax money, right?
Right.
So if you're withholding tax money at that point, not to make it like too political and tell you to go vote Bernie Sanders in the upcoming election, but like taxes aren't inherently a bad thing. And even Jesus realized in this moment, though maybe he's only trying to not be trapped, but the idea that you still are part of like a system of men, and that you have to still give to Caesar what is Caesar's. You still have to give to the government what is the government. Even if God supplied the 350s, like there's still all the currency of America right. and the system of America in place that Kanye owes what he owes. And just the idea that he goes from thinking about not letting his family starve, but to that end, he would want to keep all that money that then cost others. Like, that conflict is just so heavy at this point.
Yeah, and I just, knowing the way these songs have gone so far, like I'm thinking back to Close on Sunday, and that line, I draw the line, it's written in the sand. Like Kanye, when he writes a line like that in a song, he knows what he's doing. He says, I draw the line, which is a combative reading. And then he says it's written in the sand, which references Jesus not fighting and forgiving somebody. Like he so purposely did that when I read that line, I felt dry, that's on God. It almost feels like Kanye noting that he should give up the money. Like I felt dry, that's on God. Like God did this. God made sure I gave over my money, like I don't recognize in the moment why I should have done it. And I feel dry, and it almost seems to recall Job in a way. Like Job doesn't know why any of this is happening to him, but he still keeps believing like God did it for a reason. Like God did it for a reason. I got to keep believing in God. And that's kind of what I feel right in that moment. It's clouded by the ego and the tension and the aggressiveness. But in that small moment, he does say that's on God. What is he referencing? He's referencing all of his money going away.
I do think the tension that comes out of that then that's not Job-like is him saying that's why I charge the prices that I charge, and him worrying about his family starving. It's like if you truly had the faith in God that you say that you do, you wouldn't need that sense of control because you would know that you don't need to charge these exorbitant prices because God's going to take care of you. He will provide for you. He's not going to let your family starve. Or if he does, no. Poor Job. But it's one thing it's starting to get out of the control of God and starting to put it back onto looking at himself as the decider of what happens or doesn't happen, which I think is such a perfect place for this song to end, with that I cannot let my family starve, heading into the next song called, Travis?
Everything we need.
Oh, a song about God providing everything that you need, and that the production completely shifts and it serves as a pivot point for the rest of the album. Oh.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah, so that really, and I know we've indirectly said this, but the two halves you could really look at are you trying to control your life by living the word of God, and then the second half is completely giving over your life to God, right? Like just accepting him and having faith in him and having faith in others and knowing that everything's going to be okay if you just believe in God and let him into your life.
Yep. So there's such a difference because so in a chiasm, you tend to have the build, the pivot point, and then the decline, I guess, or the fall's such a negative word for what tends to be positive, but just everything peaks and you go down the other side and it kind of matches what happened on the other side. So you have Everything We Need and Water, which are really the two songs that in the middle of this album have a different soundscape than everything else, have a different energy than everything else, and really serve as the chiastic point of change. And what is the song coming out of On God? God is. And it's a completely different energy level and kind of praise and kind of faith than we see in On God.
Man, I'm here for this shit.
That's what makes the album so cool. Like, I get people getting to these lines and thinking, like, oh, the 350 and IRS lines, like, those are dumb. And it's, like, I think if we're only looking at them on the most superficial level, are they the most interesting lyrics around? No. Like, is the wordplay great? Is the imagery great? Like, no, but is the subtext they create and the purpose they serve and the intercontextuality of not just this song, but the album on a whole stupendous? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And that's where we get so much of the power of Kanye as a lyricist at this point, is that I think he's so unrivaled in how he uses subtext and intercontextuality to build meaning and narrative.
Tubular, man.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow. That took a lot longer than I thought it would.
Yeah.
I was kind of joking when I said an hour and a half at the beginning.
Is it longer?
It is.
It is. So sorry, everybody. If you're still with us, maybe we'll make this a 2-part episode. Who knows? But
I like when they're long.
well, then, if you're still with us, thank you. You're appreciated. Well, so our Skype connection ended up dying on us. So it says it's reconnecting. Right now, Travis is probably talking to his mic or sitting there quietly, while I'm just here staring at the screen, waiting for Skype to reconnect, narrating my life.
Ooh.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of On God, and that we can do this again real soon, discussing things like Everything We Need, Water, God Is, Hands On, Use This Gospel, and lastly, Jesus is Lord. We'll get there. It'll be a beautiful journey along the way, filled with insight, laughter, and, above all, friendship. So, stay wavy.
Hello.
Keep it loopy.
God, is it working?
I think it's working.
Oh, gosh.
Though I recorded a whole outro that was just me narrating, waiting for Skype to reconnect us.
But did you close out the show?
Kind of.
We could just go with that.
Stay wavy.
I'm back in loopy and holy.